a warm welcome. Now we can see file handling in Python. While opening and closing files. Python provides basic functions and methods necessary to manipulate files by default. You can do most of the file manipulation operation using a file object. The open function, that is how to open a file using the open function. Before you can read or write a file, you have to open it using Python's built-in open function. What happens when we call this function? This function creates a file object which would be utilized to call another support methods associated with. With the help of file object, we are asking to read something from the file. We are asking something to be returned to the file. So initially our intention is to create a file object. So we can create a file object by calling built-in method open function for opening a file. Syntax is we have to specify a file object equal to open file name, which is a compulsory parameter, then access mode and buffering, which are optional parameters. We'll see parameter in detail. File name is an argument which is a string value that contains the name of file that we want to access, that we want to open. Access mode parameter determines the mode in which the file has to be opened. That is, file has to be opened in read mode or write mode or in append mode, etc. This is an optional parameter. By default, file will be opened in read mode. That is, we can open the file just for reading the contents of that particular file. The next parameter is buffering. If the buffering value is set to 0, no buffering takes place. And if the buffering value is 1, line buffering is performed while accessing a file. If you want to specify the buffering value as an integer greater than 1, then the buffering action is performed within the indicated buffering size. That is 5. The indicated buffer size is 5. If negative, the buffer size is system default. That is, default behavior will be considered. So this is syntax for opening the file. Only after opening the file, we can perform read operation or write operation to a file. And while opening the file, we will get an object in return, and that object is named as file object. See various modes are the second parameter of open method. R, which will opens a file in the read mode. That means file is open for reading only. In this case, a file pointer is placed at the beginning of file. And that is not compulsory to specify this parameter. By default, this is the mode. R plus opens a file for both reading and writing. Here also the file pointer is placed at the beginning of the file. W opens a file for writing only. If the file already exists, this mode will override the existing file. If file doesn't exist, it will create a new file for writing. And what happens if you use W plus mode? It will open a file for both writing and reading. Overrides the existing file if the file exists, and if the file doesn't exist, it will create a new file for reading and writing. A opens a file for appending. Here the file pointer is placed at the end of file if the file exists. That is, file is opened in the append mode. New contents will be added to the end of existing file. If the file doesn't exist, it will create a new file for writing. It will work like W mode. Now we can see file object attributes. File.closed. This attribute will return true if the file is closed, false otherwise. File.mode will return the access mode with which file was opened. Either it was opened in read mode or write mode. In order to return those access mode value, we are using this file object attribute file.mode. File.name will return the name of file that is open. Then the close method. The close method of a file object flushes any unwritten information and closes the file object, after which no more writing can be done to the file. Python normally automatically closes a file when the reference object of a file is reassigned to another file. But it is always a good practice to use the close method to close a file. Syntax for closing the file is very simple. File object name dot close. Example regarding file handling operation. In the first statement is a command statement. After that we are opening the file foo.txt. The foo is the name of the file and txt is the extension. And it is open here in the write mode. The mode doesn't matter in case of this example. And what is done in the next statement? I'm trying to print the name of the file fo.name. And after the operation is completed, I'm closing the file using fo.close statement. And what is fo here? Here fo is a file object created when we open the file. In this statement, we are opening the file foo.txt in write mode. So this will create a file object. That file object is fo. And this file object will point to the beginning of the file. And in the next statement, I'm using a file object attribute to retrieve the file name. fo.name will return the name of the file and it will be displayed with the help of a print statement. Once the use of file is done, we can close it using the close method. So fo.close statement is used in this example to close the opened file. This is a simple example. Now we'll see how to write data to file. The write method is used to write data to a file. The write method writes data or write any string to a file that is opened. It is important to note that Python strings can have binary data and not just text. The write method does not add a new line character to the end of string. So if it is the end of string, we need to add a new line character to indicate that it is the end. Syntax is here also you have to use file object dot write and we have to specify the string that is to be returned to the file. So now we'll see a simple example showing how to write content to a file. So initially we need to open a file, file.txt. In order to write to it, we need to open in the write mode. Again, the open method will create a file object. And using the file object, I am calling the write method. And inside the write method, I need to specify the string that is to be returned to the file. See here in between, I have used /n. What's the purpose of /n here? It means that the line is broken there. So I have already told the write method won't by default add new line. In order to add new line, we need to add this escape sequence, /n escape sequence. Once the file operation is over, you can close it. So here we will display a message file with the specified name is closed. Output will be like this, file with the file name file1.txt closed. So what happens when this program gets executed? A physical file is created in my folder. I don't know how much it will be clear for you. Here a physical file is created where I am marking with a red. Physical file is created in the folder in which I have saved this program and from which folder I have executed. A physical file name file1.txt is created. And the content of that file is as shown here. Wherever I have used /n, a new line is created and the next content goes to new line. For that we are using this /n escape sequence. Otherwise every content will be written as a single line into this physical file. So the purpose of this file is to store some data permanently. We know this file is physically created and data is stored in this file as long as we delete it. But if we use some variable or some data structures like list, tuple, set or dictionary, the content exists only till we execute the program. Once the program execution is done, the content is removed from the memory. But in case of file, the contents are permanently stored inside the memory. See how to read contents of an existing file. For that we use the read method. Read method reads a string from an opened file. It is important to note that Python strings can have binary data. Syntax is file object dot read. It needs a parameter count. Here the pass parameter is number of bytes to be read from the opened file, and this parameter is optional. If we specify the parameter, it means the number of bytes that is to be read from the opened file. And while reading, we'll get a string value. This method starts reading, the read method starts reading from the beginning of the file, and if the count is missing, that is, I have told that parameter is optional. So the count is missing, then it tries to read as much as characters as possible, maybe until the end of the file. Now let's see a simple. Here I have read file in the R plus mode. It is open for reading and writing, but still in this example I am just trying to read the content. See, you remember this file, file1.txt, that we have already created in previous example. So I am trying to read first 20 bytes from the file using the read method. Initially we'll open the file, then we'll try to read the content using the file object dot read 20. 20 means 20 bytes will be read. So see what is read. Welcome to Python PR. These much characters are read from the file, and the read information will be stored as a string value. So for this I have used a variable str, and in next statement I am printing the content that is read from the file. Once the file operation is done, I am closing the file using f4.close. So thank you. Now we have seen basic file handling concepts in Python. We will see more concepts in coming lectures. Thank you for now.